Hey everyone, welcome to Parallel Leaders Podcast. We are so glad you're joining us today. We have a vision to come alongside you and your organization and your leadership. And we do that by following and investing in the 8 growth points. The 8 growth points, again, are the leader must grow, the team must grow, your systems must grow, your numbers must grow, your finances must grow, you must grow your expectations, you must grow facilities, and your culture must grow. Today, we are diving into a deeper look at the 8 growth points with a great conversation that I have with an incredible entrepreneur. Her name is Jen Tribble, and she is the CEO and founder of MyCityCare, which is now spans across 10 different communities and physical locations, as well as reach into 36 other communities as well. So without further ado, let's go to my conversation with Jen Tribble. Well, I'm so excited to have this conversation. Joining with me today is Jen Tribble. She is the CEO and founder, entrepreneur extraordinaire of MyCityCare. No exaggeration on that, Jen. You're amazing. Love watching you work and watch what you've done with MyCityCare. So, man, how old is MyCityCare now?
Oh man, I think we are heading into our 6th year for sure on some of our programs, and some of them a little bit longer than that. It's about 6.5 years.
6.5 years. Okay. And tell us a little bit about how it started.
Yeah. I think this is partially your story to tell and my husband, which is awesome. You guys went to India way back in like 2016. I think we looked it up the other day because we were mad about it. And compelled by a message that you guys had heard while you guys were doing some Bible college and teaching over in India on the Matthew 25 scripture verse, which a lot of us are familiar with, but some of you might not know. Jesus is talking about the 6 areas of basic human need that apply to us all still today, being food, water, health, clothing, justice, and housing. And so we started programming that was based around all 6 of those basic needs, and we still do today. And that's a lot of how we modeled the MyCityCare program.
Okay, so what was the first program that those 6 needs? And so out of that message, you were inspired to start with a program. So what was the first program?
We started with the Shop of Wonders program. We were going through a Christmas series at the time where our church and Pastor Kelly was preaching, and we were preaching on the Matthew 25 verse, and we were sharing about these 6 areas of need and compelling people to get active in their communities and doing things like clothing drives and fill a fridge. And one of the initiatives that came out of that was the Shop of Wonders initiative. So that was the first year we were giving out toys and hampers, but we really felt like we could elevate that experience and take it to the next level where families would be a participant in that. So it wasn't something that was just us handing out something throughout the program, but we were getting to know the families, we were spending intentional time with the families, and just really creating that dignified experience. So Shop of Wonders was birthed out of that heart. And today what we do and what we started with the next year after that was we would take a retail space and just decorate it top to bottom like a toy shop. We had our volunteer teams dress up like Christmas elves, and they got the whole experience from coming through to getting hot chocolate and apple cider to picking out stocking stuffers for their kids, all the way through to getting big gifts and gift wrap and just like having an amazing time. And the big part of Shop of Wonders is the experience. They do get their needs met, but the big thing is that we want them to walk away feeling the value and worth that God has on their life and that sense of dignity that comes from that.
All right, so just so that people get an understanding of MyCityCare today. All right, so it started off the first year, 6.5 years ago, started off with just hampers and supplying some needs. The next year, it turns into one location, one event with putting on the Shop of Wonders, which is the Christmas experience, which dignity is a big, big part of your drive and providing needs, not just providing needs, but providing it with dignity as well. Okay, so that's now we're at 5.5 years ago, and since then, okay, now you're in 10 different communities, that physical locations, 10 different communities. And you've got programs. How many programs are you running now?
I would honestly have to go back and take stock of how many, because there is that many. I would say throughout the year, it depends on the locations, but we have 3 major programs that go on throughout the year. Plus, we do an event called Night to Shine. So you can say those are 4 major programs that we do consistently to create momentum and just community engagement, high community engagement, and volunteers. And then throughout the year, we have offices that are open that provide outreach services that give out clothing and food and different things. I would honestly have to go back and check the numbers for you, because
Yeah.
there's that many. But
Yeah, there are, and now also besides the 10 physical locations that you are operating out of 10 different communities, you also service 36 additional communities to those through MyCityCare events. So here we are, like that's what I'm talking about in celebrating you and your entrepreneurial push. A year ago, you were in 5 locations, and now you scaled really quickly, which leads us into our conversation. So those listening to it, because you're very familiar with, we've been working on the 8 growth points that we've been talking about in this month as our theme. And now we're looking at the scalability of everything that's going on. And now you have some questions of pressing into the 8 growth points and where we go from here. So let's dive into some of those questions and what. Yeah.
I just want to say too that I love the 8 growth points because they change with every season. So in one season, we're having this conversation and it completely changes in the next. So this conversation, when we were at 5 sites that were our own campuses, completely changes now when we're talking about bringing on additional communities that aren't necessarily even in our organization. So we're talking about culture things, we're talking about systems problems. And so that kind of leads me into my first question. So
Okay.
when we jump into a brand new community and you're looking at all 8 growth points, where would you focus first?
All right. So any time that you're expanding into a new community, the first and foremost thing, it's almost like top down on the 8 growth points. Again, I would start with the leader. You want to have the right point person, because the leader is going to, attract the right team, is going to develop the right systems. Eventually is going to, it'll establish the proper culture. So you want to make sure that the leader that you put into, or, into any new department, but especially if it's in a different community than you're operating now, you want to make sure that that leader encompasses your culture and your best practices, is adapting your systems and all that. So I would start with the leader, and then you're around that leader. That leader is going to be able to recruit the right team. So, and I would help that leader recruit the initial team as well and establish that team around there, because just one leader by themselves is going to have a difficult time launching something to the scale that you operate on. Is you're going to want to maybe plant a team, or definitely recruit a team that is going to be able to surround. And most of all, it's vital, and you know this, and how you operate with MyCityCare is dignity is a big deal, but the culture of what MyCityCare does is what separates it apart. So that's gonna be first and foremost. So before sending that leader in, make sure you're doubling down on culture and training and teaching in the culture.
Yeah. So in trying to identify the right leader, what would you look for as like something super practical that we could apply that would be the right leader?
Yeah, so the right leader is going to be somebody. So if there's somebody in that community already that's got a passion for that community, and they're already there, and they call you up and saying, "Hey, could we do MyCityCare here?" I would want to bring that person in and either work alongside an existing MyCityCare operation and work with existing MyCityCare staff, and be able to, so that they could work alongside. And then you're going to watch and see if, they're going to learn, but you're also watching to see if they've got the fruit and all of that. But if there's somebody that and is trusted, I would then, and I know that you've done this with Medicine Hat, because you've gone into Medicine Hat and have, we had a leader that was there that said, "Hey, could we do this here?" And very wise and how you did that, but you sent a team in to set up the first event or two, and then had them kind of participate with an existing team that got sent in to be able to do that, to see how things operate and where things go. So either bring that leader in or send a team to run the first program that you're going to run, or first number of programs you're going to run, until you're confident that you have the right leader and that they understand the culture and the systems that you operate with.
I love that. Say you brought on a leader who wasn't getting the culture, and you were working with them and developing them and mentoring them, and you just realized, okay, they're not necessarily going to be the right fit for it. What would you do to help them either develop into the right fit, find their better seat on the bus, so to speak, or do they need to go?
That's a great question. I think each situation, each person is good. If we've got an attitude problem or major culture clash that you're going, this culture is not going to reflect, then I would probably move on from that person. Biggest attribute that I would look for in a potential leader or influencer is teachability. Are they teachable? Can we teach them the culture and systems until they get it? If they're just not going to get it and there's attitude there that they're not teachable in this way, I would move on. I would not move necessarily away from that community. I would maybe slow the how we're pushing in that community and how quickly we want to do it. And I would kind of watch for somebody that would come in or be interested, could come and be the point leader that this person could work with, alongside with, but would then become the point person that would reflect the culture and develop the systems the way that you'd want to do it. But you're looking for teachability. If they're not teachable, you got to move on. But if they're teachable, you can work with anybody.
Yeah, and we find that we meet all sorts of people at all sorts of different capacity levels as we're doing this. So I kind of want to jump into a little bit about capacity. So
yes.
Say we move into a community where we have a church group who is at a lower capacity point, not necessarily because they just haven't been taking on as much that we have in the last few years. So how do we help develop other people's capacities, their group capacity, because that also is different. So their church culture might not be able to sustain where they're at or where they're going. So How do we develop that in the individual, and how do we develop that corporately?
Yeah, so developing capacity is a big that's a big key, and that's a big strategy that it takes a while to unpack. But basically what I would do is if you identify a group that doesn't have the capacity that we're looking at doing, you slow down your what you're able to do, slow it down. But I would insert team or leaders in to that situation that would then would basically model the capacity or the expression that you're doing. So you bring somebody into that team that is that is high capacity, that's going to push that team a little bit more. And you don't want to push them to explosion. You want to push them to stretch. Like, they're going to stretch, and then once they see and taste the capabilities of it and what it can do, then you've got something there. Another thing, if capacities of teams especially, and capacity of an individual is, we now go to grow yourself and leadership development. And so then I would send them to conferences, send them podcasts, give them books, do something that's going to grow themselves. So that's in individuals. In the 8 growth points is grow yourself. It's the leader. So you got to stretch your capacity. All of us, that's what personal growth is all about, stretching your capacity. Group capacity is often a reflection of systems. And so then if we have a group that is capped in their group capacity, that's more often than not a reflection of limiting systems. And so that would be something that I would go in and inspect and question and teach on systems, and then begin to bring in other systems that would open up the capacity of the group as a whole. And oftentimes, so yeah, if you got a capacity thing lid, then I would look at that capacity lid and going, is this individual? Is this a leader lid? Okay, then I'll train the leader. Is this a group capacity lid? Then I would focus on systems.
That's awesome. Well, that segues perfectly into my next question. So as we're scaling and looking at different things, What are the main systems that you would focus on as we go into a new community or as we're dealing with a new group that wants to take on something like MyCityCare or potentially church planting or things like that? What would be the systems that we would need to evaluate?
I would, you're basically in the franchising mode of things where you're scaling now where it's more than just a business or, partnered businesses. Now you're looking at franchise. So in franchising, there's a great book on franchising called The E-Myth Revisited. And it's fantastic on franchising and the purpose behind franchising. But basically, you're looking at the systems rather than just at the individual systems now of one community. You're now looking at systems that are basically from a hub that are now easily transferable to wherever. So you're basically creating where I would go is create a manual or manuals of the programs that you could then give to the startups or give to each one that would be kind of the idiot proof guide to running Shop of Wonders or running one of Night to Shine or running one of the programs, the multiple programs that you're running, and give it to them as and then train them in that system, but make it in such a way where you're not having to be at every location, but you can have a binder or manuals or videos or some sort of education system that they can go and do it. So when you travel the world and you get a Starbucks and I've done it, I've gotten a Starbucks in China and I've gotten Starbucks in Thailand and I've gotten Starbucks in Africa and I've got Starbucks in the same across the street at home here. You're right. I can get the same service, same expectation, all the rest of it. Well, how in the world do these franchises do it? If they're able to do it, then we're able to do it as well. Well, a lot of what they do is they have manuals that are the ingredients of creating systems that are transferable, that are teachable, and they don't have to be there. Howard Schultz doesn't have to be at every location in China. He's not visited all these locations, but there is a manual, a system that was put in place, including you go to every Starbucks, they ask you your name. At every drive-through now, they're asking, so, hey, what do you got going on today? And all these different conversations. You're going, that's not just a friendly, that they're actually training in dignity. They're training in conversation, and that's part of it. So I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Founder. It's a story of.
I did watch that one. Yes.
Yeah, it's a great story of the Ray Kroc and development of the system of franchising McDonald's and he went so far as developing a template of what the building would look like and how the flow would work so that they could and all of that the menus and the ingredients and the layout and the flow, the training, all of that was they systematized that it could be duplicated anywhere.
It's so good. I have like so many questions now based off.
Yeah.
Okay, so first off, you create resources kind of thing. How do you create buy-in on your team? So when you implement those resources, the teams that are already existing are invested in that and want to use the resources that you made.
Yes, well, that's culture. Now we're talking about the culture, and that's onboarding the right team, the right people. So we want to reward, and you develop culture. Culture is all about behavior. We'll reward what we want repeated, and we will challenge mediocrity, and we will penalize, what is off culture and what is not right behavior. So you want to reward, promote, create more opportunities, celebrate whatever rewarding is more than just financial, but reward people that are hungry and buying in and running the system, celebrate them. That creates a behavior that is clear to everybody else what you want done and that you want it to do. And then somebody who doesn't follow the manual, doesn't do the thing, then it's definitely going to be challenged and all that. I mean, there's very practical things like, if someone wants to start a MyCityCare in their town, you're saying, here's our expectations up front. Here's what you need to do. And then even having that, an operation, paper that this is an operation, understanding, a memorandum of understanding of this is what it takes to run it. And you will agree to do these things, and including that memorandum of understanding, is that you will take these manuals and you will learn them and watch them and implement them according to our standards and not cut corners. And yeah, these are things that are non-negotiable. These are the things that are negotiable.
So good. You're like reading my mind when it comes to these questions. I was just going to ask you, what are your non-negotiables?
Yeah. Well, non-negotiables it depends on industry. So non-negotiable for you, I know this, and in the conversation already, we can see it, it's come up multiple times, is we don't just provide services, we provide services with dignity. So a non-negotiable is we are not going to cut corners and make it impersonal. And we want to create, as important as giving a hamper is, we want to give a hamper with dignity. So we will not become, what sometimes can become as degrading, services to the poor, and we want to do it with dignity. So a non-negotiable is that. Some of the other non-negotiables are, when we run these programs, we run them together. This is how the program, in the program, we run them together. We run them in this manner. This is why we run it this manner. But the different locations, and that each one is a different location, different community. There's negotiables in locations and the setup and the size of the locations and the community that you're serving. So there are negotiables there, but there's certain non-negotiables. And one of the biggest thing is we're going to come alongside other agencies. We're going to provide dignity, and we are going to, and serve certain needs at certain times. Yeah.
I kind of want to jump back to even just the conversation that we were having about capacity, because I'm an Enneagram 8 and you're an Enneagram 8. And my natural tendency is to challenge people. And I usually try to do it in the nicest way possible. Not always my gift. I try. So how do you had mentioned, we don't want to push people to the point of explosion or that. How do you know, what are some signs that we can look for that people are getting either to that point where it's we don't want to stretch them too much further, but we do have a certain level of expectation and balance of our standards of excellence. So how do we, in a healthy way, move people in that direction without causing an explosion?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's one that I think benefits every team. We all have different capacity levels on all of our teams, but, and leaders typically have higher capacity, higher passion that drives with it. So I look at key examples on my team and saying, okay, who else, am I pushing too hard? Then I know if there's others that are running with me, then I'm not running too fast, too far, too hard. But and knowing full well, I think it was Jack Welch that said to you, right? You need to be able to identify. You're going to have a top 20% that are going to be high capacity, run with you. You're going to have the middle 70, and then you're going to have the bottom 10. And this is just kind of the way every team, every leadership works. So what he said is, you want to reward your top 20 that are running with you and give them opportunities and all that. But you really want to focus on your middle 70. And your middle 70 is kind of going to give you that indication. So I'd look at the top of that middle 70 and going, okay, if I just push that top of that thing a little bit harder, a little bit more, that they would then jump into the top 20%. And you don't want to keep the bottom of that 70 from slipping into the bottom 10%. So you want to basically gauge your pace and your expectation and that capacity on making that middle 70% of your team better and stronger and stretch their capacity. You're going to have to get rid of the bottom 10%. And Jack Welch goes so far as saying every year you're going to have to get rid of the bottom 10. But you're not trying to keep, again, that 70 from slipping into that bottom 10, but you're trying to push them to become the top 20. And so that's the group that you want to focus on, and that's the pace you want to run, and you want to push that group. You're not going to have any problem pushing the top 20, not a problem at all. They're with you. But you're going to want to focus on that middle 70 and push them and run at that pace and not burn them out, not push them into the bottom 10, but yeah.
So would you say that if you see people sliding from that middle 70% into the bottom 10, you're pushing them out?
No, Not necessarily, but that's an opportunity to then challenge them and saying, "Hey, you know what? You're a valuable part of our team. I see this slip." Um, Differentiation is the term that Jack Welch uses, and you can use it with your team and say, I think it's in his book Winning. It's fantastic. And he says in theirs that you challenge that bottom 70%, make it very aware and saying, "Hey, you're in danger of doing this. I don't want to lose you. So I need this and this and this." Make it very clear what the next expectation is on them, so that they can avoid joining the bottom 10 that would get cut.
That's awesome. And then leading out of this, I guess, is we've talked a lot about creating in these coaching kind of, when we're coaching our teams and different things like that, creating a table of truth. How do like give context to that for people maybe that don't know? And then also like, how do we actually use that and create a more candid culture for coaching in our teams?
Right. So the table of truth is where we are going to not be afraid of addressing anything, anytime, anywhere with anyone. So that means that we can have candid conversations on our team, that we're not, and a lot of that has to do with the culture that we create, but that we're not getting so personal in what we do, and people aren't getting personal in what they do, that their highest value is on making the team better, the organization better. Not their highest value is on their own position or their own identity attached to the job that they're doing. We want to get to so we want to create a culture where we're candid, and that leads with us as leaders, and allowing others to be candid with us, and how we react to their candor is going to really determine whether or not we're going to create that culture. So if we overreact and get sensitive and emotional and all the rest of it, that's going to stop the table of truth in a heartbeat, because people are like, "Ooh, no, that's a no-go zone." You communicate it. It's a no-go zone, and it stops the conversation. So you want to make sure that when people are candid with you, that your response to that is going to encourage more candor rather than discourage more candor. So in that, creating that culture is, I would systematize the table of truth and have meetings, and use the 6 thinking hats. That's another book recommending, I guess, but about in the meeting, and allowing everyone to black hat think, which is take the negative side and what could go wrong with this. Let's acknowledge the risks and the problems that we're needing to solve, and have that on a weekly basis. But I'd also say, like, twice a year is have meetings with your team and your staff one-on-one, and be candid with them, and evaluating with them, and saying, evaluating them again, like the differentiation, saying, "Hey, you're in my top 20. I want to reward you for the you've done this and this and this and this well. I want to keep you there. So if you could work on this, it would take you over the top. Middle 70, hey, you're right there. You're close to our top 20. And if we had just changed this and adjust this, then this is going to be great." And I think a lot of times the table of truth, the candor conversations that we have, really as leaders, it comes down to us taking the time to be very, very clear in our expectations, and making it very, very clear to our staff and our teams, our volunteers, that what our expectations are for the organization, but what our expectations are for each staff member. And if we're clear there, it's a lot easier to challenge and have conversations, call fouls when they're fouls, and all that fun stuff.
Is there some like tactical advice that you can give us eights for like calling fouls, but doing it in like a nice way?
Yeah, well, not everybody like eights like it straight to the point and blunt. There's other personalities that are not that. They don't like confrontation. Well, and so being aware of the different personalities on your team, how they handle confrontation, how they handle candid conversations and truth is vital to understand. And then you can approach each one with some care, and no, you don't ever want to compromise the truth, but your delivery to some of the more sensitive types is going to be different than it is to eights. Like when you've got somebody that's likes it blunt, give it to them blunt. That's better.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so Have you ever encountered personally in your own leadership, like a leadership lid, and how did you get past it?
Oh, absolutely. I encounter lids, all the time. And as I've pastored throughout the years, this is you get through every stage in every organization I've led is the largest organization I've ever led. So then you get to the place where it stalls, and you're going, is it what's stalling? And number one thing that I look at all the time is have I reached my capacity as a leader? And when I identify that, where have I reached my capacity as a leader? Like, what is the thing that if I developed the strength that I got better at, or the area that I could improve in the most, that would take that lid off of the organization and myself, then I invest time and money and find mentors that are gifted in that area, and go to conferences that of people that are doing it, and challenging that area and grow myself. And so, yeah, whenever I identify it, and I do it all the time, you have to be very evaluating yourself regularly. But then you get to the place of going, ooh, yeah, no, this is overwhelming me, or this is stressing me. That's a sign of a capacity lid. If I keep bumping out, I can't solve a problem. A problem keeps surfacing over and over and over again, and it just keeps coming up. That's a capacity lid on me. So then, what do I need to learn and grow in and develop, so that doesn't become a repeated problem over and over and over again?
Yeah, I think that's been one of my biggest struggles is I constantly feel like I don't ever want to hit a lid. So then I'm constantly pushing further, but then sometimes that's at a detriment to my own like health and well-being.
Well, and you bring up a really good point, because when you reach capacity, like, something has to give. If it's not your mental health, it'll be your physical health. If it's not your physical health, it'll be your relationship health, right? With family, spouses, or like, there's something has to give. And so you need to, when you look at the capacity of yourself, it's not just looking at the capacity of yourself in your role and your career. It's looking at, what's my health capacity with my mental health capacity, with my relational health capacity, which my spiritual health capacity. Where's the capacity? And are each one of those each one of those healthy? And if one of them is not, or there's tension in that area, then where do I need to grow in that area of my capacity and put my attention there, so that because if your physical health gives out, it's going to affect your capacity to lead with the organization. If your relational health gives out, and you're going through marriage troubles or problems with children, or it's distracting to your organizational health and your ability to lead on that end. So when you see identify those areas, it's not just in my career, in my leadership, in my abilities. The capacity is all across the board, and making sure that each one of them I'm growing in and strengthening and focusing on. And you and I have been on a very similar journey together, physical health, and paying a lot of attention to that. And it's remarkable. We were just remarking about that not that long ago, about how when we focus on our physical health, how much it's helped our mental capacity to think, and our energy levels and everything else. And we can run, and this is scary for all of our teams, but we can run at a faster pace, because we didn't realize, I didn't realize, and I don't think you did, that our physical capacity we were hitting a roof there, and that it was and how big of an effect that had on the organization. So those are big.
Yeah, I think it's like the eights. We like don't like to recognize that we have like weaknesses, or that our bodies are finite. We actually do have a limit there.
We do. We're
for
human.
24 hours.
Yeah.
So I think
Well,
that's one of the biggest things I've learned in this season is how to, and it probably will change with every season, but just how to intentionally look at those rhythms and making sure that those are healthy so that it can sustain everything else. Because as an eight, I don't see, and one thing that I need help with is recognizing the indicators of like, okay, like, because like I'll push past tired, like that's normal for me. It's like I'm just not, like I'm feeling a little bit tired, but I'm going to stay up for 2 more hours and finish this project, and my body can just like deal with it. I'll have another cup of coffee and then just power through. kind of thing. But really, like those signals, like we need to be paying attention to those.
There's a big difference between being tired and being weary. And tiredness we can get over and we can recoup from. Being weary is detrimental. And we'll put a lid on it. But it's been amazing watching you lead, and it's been amazing watching you how you personally evaluate yourself and adjust and make those movements and make sure that capacity is not in there. So, man, thank you so much for joining today and for these questions. Great questions. I'm sure that those listening got lots out of this. So thank you so much, and thanks for what you do, Jen.
Yeah, love it.
What an incredible conversation with Jen. So much to take away in the questions that she asked. I love this idea of being able to mentor like this online. And if you are curious about MyCityCare and Jen as a leader, I encourage you to follow her on Instagram. Her hashtag is @JenTribble. That's JenTribble. And you can find her on Instagram @JenTribble. Also, I encourage you to follow MyCityCare. If you're curious about what they do, what they've got, you can find them at parallelchurch.com/MyCityCare. Also, you can find them on Instagram. Just search MyCityCare and you'll see each location has their own little page there as well. So find them on Instagram and learn more about that. One thing that I took away from our conversation today, and the takeaway that we all want to leave with, is that each season requires a different focus. When you look at the 8 growth points, there's really different seasons that kind of highlight the weaknesses or the need for one or more of those growth points. And what we learned today is that we want to evaluate our capacity limits. Evaluate our capacity limits. If you find that your team the capacity is personnel driven, where there's one person or more on your team that is the reason for the capacity ceiling, then you need to invest in growing them. Or if it's you that's the personnel that's the capacity lid on your organization, then invest in growing yourself. If you look at it and saying this is a corporate capacity lid, then focus on growing your systems, and it's going to be evaluating and stretching and changing and growing your system. So the takeaway, each season requires a different focus, and focus by evaluating your capacity limits. Man, we so love this conversation today, and we would love to have you on the podcast as well and have a conversation. If you'd be interested in being a guest on the conversation and like your questions to be answered live as we go through this conversation, this type of mentorship, you could be our guest. Just send us your questions and your desire to be on the podcast, and you can send that to parallelleaders.com /coaching. That's parallelleaders.com /coaching. Man, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, would you please take the time to rate and review it? It helps us get this content out further. So just take the time to rate and review. And also, if you enjoyed this content, subscribe, and we will send you emails that gives you updates on what is coming up on our podcast as well. Also, you can find us at parallelleaders.com for great blog content and more leadership content that will help you grow you and your organization. Thanks for joining us. God bless.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Parallel Leaders, where we help you target and evaluate your organization, leadership, or growth department under the microscope of 8 growth points to optimize your effectiveness as a leader.